Let's talk about the Swatch Blancpain collaboration, at least if you're not already sick to death of hearing about it already. After all, seemingly every influencer and wannabe influencer has covered it ad nauseum at this point. But I thought I would add to the cacophony and give you my views. And in short, my views aren't super positive, but nor are they catastrophically negative. I don't love the collaboration, but I also don't hate it. I don't view the watch as tremendous value for money. I don't necessarily think it's worth the queues at this point, nor do I think it's worth the markup that some flippers are trying to get. But I do regard it as kind of interesting and it is a little bit fun. That said, at this price point, I think there are better alternatives. Perhaps a watch from Orient, or maybe a watch from Seagull Design, which have more interesting materials and also have automatic movements, and I'll include a couple of links to those in the description below. But if you've got any thoughts about the watch and the collaboration, also let me know that in the comments as well. But otherwise, let's dig deeper into the watch. Let's talk about what the watch and the collaboration actually is. Well, the collaboration is between Swatch and Blancpain, reportedly to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the 50 Fathoms watch. Now, that might just be a marketing gimmick. They might have been deciding to do this collaboration anyway and just looking for an excuse, but that's what they've said it is. Now, the watch is primarily Swatch more than it is Blancpain. It takes some of the aesthetics from the 50 Fathoms, but it's pretty much Swatch materials, Swatch movement, Swatch everything, other than being an homage to the 50 Fathoms. So in terms of the case and the materials, well, it's made out of Swatch's bioceramic, which is basically a plastic. Now, the bioceramic is nice enough as far as it goes, but it has reportedly had issues with dye transfer. That is, with different colorations rubbing off onto your skin. At least that was what was reported with the Moon Swatch, the predecessor to this collaboration. And I'd be wanting to see if those are resolved and recur here before I rushed out to buy the watch. The watch itself is available in 5 different colorways, and I'll come back to the aesthetics in a little bit. The movement itself is Swatch's System 51 movement, which has 51 components. It is a disposable automatic movement, so it isn't a quartz movement. This stands in contrast to the Moon Swatch, which was a quartz movement. So Swatch clearly listened to feedback when designing which movement to put into this watch. Now, the movement itself has some interesting characteristics. For example, it has 91 meters of water resistance, or 300 feet, or 50 fathoms. That to some extent is a bit of a gimmicky number, obviously designed to tie into the 50 Fathoms watch. The water resistance is presumably greater than 91 meters, just decided to round it to 91 to kind of make up for that 50 fathoms. Now, in terms of the power reserve, it again has 90 hours of power reserve, which again is pretty impressive for an automatic movement, but like I said, this movement is disposable and isn't going to be serviceable. So it isn't exactly a high-end movement, but it's kind of neat enough, and certainly is more interesting than the quartz movement that they put into the Moon Swatch. Now, in terms of the appearance, there are 5 different colorways, reportedly representing different oceanic themes. I'm not entirely sure how they come up with these colors. It kind of seems like they had 5 colors, and they reverse engineered an excuse to have each of these 5 in the watch. But in any case, that's what they're going with. They've got these 5 different colors, each of them come with a different NATO strap, and each of them have a subtly different display caseback, so a different theme on the rotor. Now, they look nice enough as far as they go, but I can't exactly work out why each of these colors belong to a different ocean. For example, I can't work out why one ocean is blue and another one is green. I also can't work out why the Antarctic is white, but the Arctic is orange and beige. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but that's kind of what they're going with. Now, in terms of the dial, each of them is, well, different. I kind of like the appearance of each of them, and they kind of have subtle differences. So, for example, the orange and beige one, well, that has that no radiation sign. The Arctic one has its little water identifier, so you've got different themes on each of the dials. The blue one, to my mind, is the most aesthetically pleasing. I think that's the most interesting and the nicest color. I think it's the most wearable color, but again, it really depends on which of these you like. Obviously, the no radiation one has an homage to one of the actual 50 Fathoms watches, so we can see that being appealing to some people, but again, it's really just a matter of personal preference. So that's a summary of the watch. So what do I actually think of it? Well, I don't dislike it. It's kind of fun, it's disposable, it's interesting, it kind of looks nice, it has an homage to 50 Fathoms. I don't dislike it. However, at the price point, you can get watches with more interesting movements. So, for example, you can get an Orient with its automatic movement and again a more interesting appearance. Or you can get a watch from Seagull Design with a titanium case for that same price. And I'd rather have a titanium case rather than a plastic case. But of course, the plastic one here has like the Swatch and Blancpain name, so if that's important to you, well, you could go with that one. But just bear in mind, this is not a Blancpain watch, it is a Swatch watch made out of plastic with a non-serviceable movement that is clearly a little bit disposable. So you're really kind of getting what you're paying for here. Now, the disposable movement is neither here nor there for me. I appreciate that it's an automatic movement. I appreciate that it has some neat characteristics. So the 90-hour power reserve, the decent water resistance that kind of ties into the theme, I kind of like that, and for the price point, well, it kind of makes some sense, especially when you compare it to some of the Tissot watches, again at that price point. Now at this price point, therefore, I'm not totally convinced about the watch. I also have some issues with the bioceramic and the reports of dye transfer. I'm not super keen on the color rubbing off on my skin, because A, that probably means the color will rub off the watch, but also it means that I'm going to have to wipe that off my skin and then work out whether that's going to transfer onto a shirt. It's just not ideal. So therefore, I'd have some reservations there as well. So overall, I don't hate the watch, but I don't think it's necessarily great value for money. We of course have the question about whether Swatch or Blancpain benefit as brands from this collaboration, or perhaps neither of them benefit, or both of them benefit. So let's have a look at that. Now in terms of Swatch, it's clear to me that Swatch benefits from this. Swatch is supposedly the lower tier brand, and therefore by latching onto a premium or prestige brand, it automatically helps to elevate them in status. Furthermore, this has created more hype for Swatch. It's gotten people lining up outside the stores. It's gotten more news coverage. It looks popular and in demand. This is clearly beneficial for Swatch. And also, they can just shift some product. It's good for Swatch as an organization. It's not quite as clear-cut to me for Blancpain. For Blancpain, they may benefit in terms of increased awareness, because Blancpain is a relatively lesser-known premium brand. It simply isn't in the popular consciousness quite as much as, say, Audemars Piguet or Patek Philippe or Rolex, and therefore Blancpain can hope to elevate itself in brand awareness from this. However, on the other hand, there are claims that this might cheapen Blancpain, because Blancpain is supposed to be unattainable, it's supposed to be prestige, it's supposed to be a little bit aloof, and therefore by latching on to Swatch, it perhaps dilutes some of that. It makes them look a little bit cheaper, a little bit more attainable. It makes them look a little bit more fun, a little bit more Happy Meal, a little bit more popular and just populist in nature. And therefore it kind of dilutes Blancpain's brand as a brand entity. Now, I'm a little bit in two minds about this. I don't think it's an obvious conclusion either way. After all, you've already got brands like Omega, which had partnered with Swatch. You've already got Audemars Piguet doing all of its weird collaborations with Marvel. You've got myriad brands doing popular collaborations. However, on the other hand, Blancpain did have a particular staid, aloof image, which to some extent helped to court a particular crowd. For example, when I think about Blancpain, I think about Vladimir Putin wearing his aqualung. That's kind of the person I think about wearing a Blancpain. Now that can be good or bad depending on your perspective, but it is a brand image. And by diluting that brand image, to some extent they dilute their USP. There's going to be a person that wants to buy a watch for that particular reason. However, if they're partnering with Swatch and making it more general, then maybe they don't buy into that niche quite as much. Whether that's good or bad, well, that's really a matter for marketers to determine. But if you've got any thoughts about the watch, well, let me know that in the comments below. And otherwise, thanks a lot for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully I see you next time as well.